Welcome to the debate. Think about the last time you heard the word productivity at work. I mean, did it actually mean getting more done, or did it just mean you were expected to be more exhausted?
Right, usually the latter.
Exactly. So today we're tearing down the illusion that modern management is this neutral, objective science. Because when you walk into a corporate skyscraper, those rigid reporting lines, the obsession with quarterly targets, they feel like the laws of physics. They are presented as objective reality.
Like a sterile equation, right, where inputs equal outputs and, well, human beings are just the inputs.
Yeah, exactly. But if you have ever questioned why certain voices are perpetually sidelined in meetings, or why standard operating procedures seem to, protect the company at the expense of your own psychological safety, you are bumping up against the invisible rules of the office.
And that is exactly what critical management studies, or CMS, is all about. It's a field of research that exposes those rules. It reveals how everyday management practices are actually socially constructed choices. They're designed to distribute power.
Yep. And they heavily mask ideologies like neoliberalism, which is basically the assumption that hyper-competitive free market logic is, the only valid way to organize human life.
It forces us to ask whether the quote-unquote normal we experience every day is actually designed for our mutual benefit, or if it's steeped in historical choices that just serve a very select few at the top of the pyramid.
Right. So the tension we are unpacking today is what we actually do with that revelation. Because if traditional management is inherently exploitative, I look at the literature and I see a clear mandate. I mean, we have to fundamentally dismantle these traditional organizational structures. I'll be arguing for a radical reconstruction of the workplace into post-growth alternative models.
And I look at that exact same research and see something entirely different. I'll be arguing that the true power of this field isn't in, burning down the global economy. It's in providing an intellectual toolkit, a reflexive diagnostic lens to navigate, survive, and ethically reform these existing corporate architectures right from the inside out.
Let's get right into the mechanics of why the radical approach is really the only logical conclusion here. Mainstream management theory sells itself as this value-free pursuit of best practices.
Right, the whole "we just want efficiency" line.
Exactly. But when you pull back the curtain, traditional management is a system of power distribution explicitly designed for corporate dominance. The practices we consider standard, the relentless hierarchy, the obsession with infinite growth on a finite planet, they aren't inevitable.
Sure, they're choices.
Right. So to truly adopt a critical approach to management, we have to stop managing for management's sake. We have to move to post-growth business models, worker-owned cooperatives, flat hierarchies that prioritize ecological well-being and social equity over profit. You simply can't tweak a system built for extraction. You have to replace it.
I entirely agree that management is about power, but demanding we burn down the system ignores the agency of the millions of people who are currently trapped inside it. I mean, this research provides a survival toolkit, not just some utopian blueprint.
A survival toolkit?
Yes. The core mechanism here is reflexivity. And this isn't just looking back and reflecting on a past mistake, like, oh, I messed that up. It's looking into the mirror to interrogate the very assumptions you use to make decisions.
But how does that actually change anything?
It gives people practical insights for navigating workplace politics, building coalitions, handling severe moral dilemmas. Leaders can use this lens to become thoughtful professionals who transform existing organizations into more democratic spaces. You don't have to dismantle the entire enterprise to protect the people inside it.
Okay, but if the enterprise is built on a coercive foundation, navigating it better doesn't solve the problem. It just makes you a more compliant participant.
I wouldn't call it compliant.
Well, let's look at how this plays out with a concept everyone universally praises.
Teamwork. Okay.
When you critically examine modern corporate teamwork, it is rarely about genuinely empowering employees. It's often a highly sophisticated, subtle form of control.
How so? I mean, teamwork is inherently collaborative.
Think of unlimited PTO policies in tech companies.
Oh, right. The classic trap.
Exactly. It sounds like absolute freedom, right? But without a rigid hierarchy telling you when you are allowed to leave, the teamwork culture kicks in and weaponizes guilt. You basically self-exploit.
because you don't want to let the team down.
Right. You never take a day off because you don't want to look like the weak link during a sprint. The peer pressure does the manager's job for them. That is subtle control. If the fundamental structure is designed to extract maximum labor, adding a layer of collaborative paint doesn't change the extraction.
See, that unlimited PTO example is a perfect illustration of what a critical management lens actually uncovers. It spots the trap.
Yeah, but spotting it isn't fixing it.
But it is the first step. Just because collaborative structures can be weaponized into peer pressure doesn't mean we must abolish collaboration entirely. This is where reflexivity comes in.
Okay, walk me through that.
You expand your toolkit so you become a more rounded thinker. You deconstruct that specific mechanism of guilt. So a reflexive manager spots the unlimited PTO trap and says, okay, the system is driving self-exploitation, therefore I'm going to mandate minimum time off for my team.
Okay, so they enforce a break.
Exactly. And they model it by logging off completely for 2 weeks. You recognize the systemic bias and you intentionally protect your team from it. You dismantle the coercive peer pressure without needing to dismantle the entire company.
I mean, I hear the appeal of the enlightened manager saving the day, but it fundamentally misunderstands how systemic power operates.
How so?
Practicing reflexivity while keeping the core profit hierarchy intact is like trying to install a human dignity app on a corporate operating system that is hard-coded to extract maximum resources.
That's a bit reductive.
It's the reality. The OS will just crash the app. The board of directors doesn't care about your team's minimum time off if it means missing the quarterly revenue target.
Well,
Let me just finish the thought. If we uncover that the foundation of the organization prioritizes corporate dominance, why are we just rearranging the furniture? Pour a new foundation.
because you pour a new foundation by first understanding the structural loads of the current one, and the structural load is carried by people.
Sure, people carry the load.
Right, and if we demand immediate, radical dismantling, if we say the only acceptable outcome is a worker-owned cooperative, we alienate the exact managers and employees who are currently in a position to enact change today. We leave them blind to the invisible rules of the office.
Why would they be blind?
Because we've basically told them that unless they quit and start a commune, their efforts are pointless.
But if you actually pour that new foundation, your old blueprints are useless anyway.
What do you mean?
You can't measure the success of a cooperative using the exact same aggressive quarterly profit metrics of a traditional corporation. The metrics themselves have to change. And this is where the inside-out reform argument completely falls apart for me.
I don't think it falls apart at all.
It does. Because the traditional focus on short-term profit motives comes at a devastating ecological and human cost. You cannot run a post-growth model inside a publicly traded company that is legally obligated to maximize shareholder returns. It's impossible.
But you don't have to be a post-growth social enterprise to change the metrics. This is where expanded metrics become the bridge between theory and operational reality.
Expanded metrics? Like what?
We are talking about integrating social equity, ecological well-being, human dignity into existing business models. That is the essence of actionable ethical leadership. It means moving beyond treating people as mere technical inputs or, human resources.
So basically ESG goals?
Yes, aligning with ESG, environmental, social, and governance goals. Integrating those metrics into an existing corporation shifts the trajectory from within.
Okay, but ESG is so often just corporate greenwashing. Slapping an ESG label on a multinational logistics company doesn't change the fact that its delivery drivers are peeing in bottles to meet algorithmic quotas.
Well, obviously, poor implementation is...
It's not just poor implementation, it's the design. The critical management literature goes much further than adding a few social goals to a traditional corporate scorecard. It explicitly calls for a shift away from growth at all costs.
True, it critiques hypergrowth.
Right. So true implementation means embracing business models that are fundamentally incompatible with traditional frameworks. A post-growth model doesn't just try to pollute a little less while growing by 10% a year. It structurally caps returns.
But capping returns isn't realistic for most companies right now.
Because the system is broken. A post-growth model prioritizes community reinvestment equilibrium. You cannot staple ecological well-being onto a system that demands infinite expansion on a finite planet. Like I said, the OS crashes the app.
Look, the idea that traditional frameworks are entirely incapable of ethical reform ignores the agency of the people running them.
I'm not ignoring agency. I'm looking at incentives.
But when leaders begin to genuinely value social justice over blind bureaucracy, they actually make different operational choices. They restructure supply chains. They voluntarily cap executive compensation. They institute stakeholder-driven governance models where the community actually gets a board seat.
That's incredibly rare.
But it happens. You can fundamentally alter the DNA of a traditional business by consistently applying these expanded metrics.
Okay, let's pressure test that exact scenario. Let's talk about the friction of this operational reality.
All right.
Say a manager who has studied all this critical theory might now deeply interrogate their role in a system that prioritizes profit over human lives. They're reflexive.
Right, they're aware.
But what happens when that reflexive, enlightened manager is handed a mandate from the corporate board demanding a 10% reduction in headcount to boost quarterly earnings?
Well, they have to respond to it.
Yeah, and the board doesn't care about the manager's reflexivity. So the manager still executes the exact same layoffs the manual dictates. They just feel bad about it now. Doesn't reflexivity in a traditional hierarchy just create guilty managers?
No, and I think that fundamentally misunderstands the distinction between simple reflection and true reflexivity.
How is it different in practice?
Reflection is looking back, feeling guilty about the layoff, and saying, oh, I wish the system were different. Reflexivity is interrogating the mirror itself and changing the action.
Changing it how? They still have to cut 10%.
If they are handed a mandate to cut costs, a genuinely reflexive leader doesn't just blindly fire the most vulnerable, precarious workers. They actively challenge the assumption that layoffs are the only path to cost savings.
By doing what? Asking the board nicely?
By using the data. They model alternative scenarios. They advocate for across-the-board pay cuts starting at the executive level. They cut vendor bloat.
And the board laughs them out of the room? I mean, come on. Power doesn't yield because a mid-level manager read a sociology essay and put together a nice PowerPoint.
It's not about a solo hero with a PowerPoint. It's about coalition building.
Coalitions among who?
A reflexive manager uses their intellectual diversity to build alliances. They talk to other department heads. They share the alternative financial models. They use the critical toolkit to prove that cutting the lowest paid workers destroys institutional knowledge and long-term viability.
Okay, but
They push back against the board's assumptions by creating a united front to protect the marginalized. That is how you change the system from within.
relying on a manager to build a coalition to save the workers risks falling straight into the trap of managerialism.
Wait, but that's exactly where the power currently sits. If the managers hold the levers, why wouldn't we start there?
Because managerialism is the ideology that managers are a distinct elite class uniquely equipped to solve organizational problems. If our solution to systemic exploitation is just better, more enlightened managers, we are still centering the managers.
I disagree that it only centers them.
It absolutely validates the hierarchy. The goal of a critical approach is to center marginalized voices, the low-wage workers, the minority groups, the people in precarious employment. It addresses alienation and disempowerment. If we rely on the benevolence of an enlightened executive class to maybe shield workers from a layoff, we aren't changing the power dynamics. We are just hoping the powerful act slightly more gently.
That assumes the critical toolkit is only for executives, and it's not. It is for personal and professional growth across all levels of an organization.
Even for the bottom tier?
Yes, it makes anyone a more thoughtful professional, not just a skilled administrator. A low-wage worker can use this exact same framework to spot systemic issues, recognize how they are being marginalized, and build their own coalition to advocate for living wages right now.
But what does that worker coalition actually look like?
It looks like organizing.
It looks like unionization. It looks like demanding participatory decision-making. And those things shift power away from the managers entirely. That is structural change. That isn't just navigating the existing architecture better. That is tearing up the floorboards.
I'm not saying structural change doesn't happen. I'm saying it happens through disciplined reflexive evolution, not instant revolution. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here.
But the good is holding us back from the necessary.
While we wait for your utopian post-growth economy to materialize, there are people suffering in workplaces today who need this diagnostic power to survive their immediate environments.
I agree.
Navigating a toxic workplace better might sound like a minor victory to a theorist, but to an employee on the brink of burnout, it is everything.
Look, I don't disagree that immediate survival is crucial. But if we stop there, we betray the core imperative of this entire field of study.
How is surviving a betrayal?
Because navigating a toxic workplace better is a reactive fix. It's a necessary survival tactic, sure, but it isn't a solution. The research warns us about massive systemic crises on the horizon. Climate collapse, AI disruption, widening inequality. It urges proactive, equitable solutions.
Right, and we get there by...
You can't proactively solve climate collapse by just being a slightly more empathetic middle manager at an oil company. We have to rethink management as a tool for fairness and sustainability, which requires us to imagine and then literally build radical alternatives. We need social enterprises. We need flat hierarchies where every worker has an equity stake and a vote.
But you build those alternatives by integrating insights from sociology, philosophy, and political economy into the minds of the people doing the work today. That interdisciplinary insight is what allows a current leader to look at a rigid reporting line and say, this is steeped in historical political choices. We can choose differently today.
And do they actually choose differently?
Yes, they initiate a transition to stakeholder-driven governance right where they are. They shift corporate goals to serve the community, not just shareholders. That is transformative change without the paralysis that always accompanies demands for absolute revolution.
But can you truly have stakeholder-driven governance within a framework that fundamentally views the worker as a resource to be optimized?
It's a spectrum, not a binary.
The whole human resources model strips people of human dignity by treating them as technical inputs on a spreadsheet. If your organizational structure is built on extracting maximum productivity for minimum cost, no amount of reflexivity can bridge the gap between human dignity and human exploitation. The structure itself is the contradiction.
The structure is a contradiction, which is exactly why this critical lens trains you to analyze those very contradictions. It trains you to deconstruct dominant narratives like growth is always good.
Okay.
By engaging with complex social, ethical, and political issues, a leader changes the structure from the inside out. They stop seeing people as inputs and start designing jobs that foster creativity. They dismantle the mechanisms of subtle control.
I mean, ideally.
This acts as a practical engine. It broadens the scope of management thinking so that the next generation of leaders who are being trained in business schools right now are equipped to navigate these dilemmas effectively.
I see the value in equipping the next generation with better analytical tools, obviously. But the danger of framing this primarily as an educational or personal growth tool is that it domesticates a radical critique.
Domesticates it?
Yes. When we connect workplace issues to broader social concerns like capitalism, globalization, and massive social injustice, we aren't doing so just to make managers more rounded thinkers at a cocktail party. We are exposing a profound crisis. Critiquing the obsession with productivity at the expense of worker well-being isn't an intellectual exercise. It is a mandate for structural overhaul. If we accept that power operates to perpetuate inequality, we must build systems where power is fundamentally decentralized.
It's not about domesticating the critique. It's about making the critique actionable. Actionable for the concerned citizen, the entry-level employee, the mid-level manager.
But actionable within the same broken paradigm.
No, this intellectual diversity is valuable regardless of your own political or professional leanings. If you demand that someone adopt a purely post-growth, radical anti-capitalist stance just to utilize these insights, you alienate the vast majority of people who desperately need these tools.
I see your point.
By embracing this as a reflexive diagnostic tool, we invite everyone into the work of building more democratic and humane workplaces, step by step, decision by decision.
Well, we have covered incredible ground today, unpacking the deep implications of critical management studies. To bring my perspective into focus, if we truly honor these insights, we must use them not just to observe the invisible rules of the office, but to systematically dismantle them. The evidence points to traditional management as a construct built on power distribution and corporate dominance. Rebuilding organizations around post-growth, participatory, and highly democratic models is really the only way to genuinely prioritize human dignity and ecological survival over mere technical efficiency.
And from my perspective, I maintain that this field is most vital as a diagnostic lens and a practical engine for everyday application. By practicing deep reflexivity, leaders and employees alike can inject social equity and expanded metrics into their existing frameworks. It provides immediate, actionable reform, allowing us to navigate complex moral dilemmas and foster democratic spaces without having to abandon our current operational realities.
I think we can both acknowledge a profound point of convergence today, though. The traditional efficiency-only view of management is a deeply flawed construct. It is one that ignores power dynamics, systemic inequality, and frankly, the complexities of human psychology.
Absolutely. We completely agree that the normal we experience in the workplace, the hierarchies, the metrics, the pressure, is a choice, not an inevitability. And because it is a choice, it's something we have the collective power to reconsider.
Exactly. Where the tension remains is in the scale of the solution. Does acknowledging those flaws demand a radical structural overhaul of our economy and workplaces, or a profound internal shift in how leadership and organizational practice are executed daily? There is clearly so much more to explore regarding how we navigate the realities of modern work.
There really is, and the literature leaves us with a perfect framework for doing exactly that. It forces us to stop accepting the architecture of our work lives as a given.
It does. It asks us to look past the glass and steel of that corporate skyscraper we talked about at the beginning, and it leaves us with one defining question to consider. If your organization's goals weren't dictated by efficiency alone, what kind of value would you choose to create tomorrow?